Peter, thank you so much for your time and the work that you do. I guess you get a real insight into where we're at with fast fashion, the amount of clothing that we're throwing away, and obviously that there are opportunities that we're potentially missing to do something about it. The amount that just ends up in the landfill or gets incinerated at the moment is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the amount of textiles in the UK that go to landfill a year is around about 350,000 tonnes of material, clothing and textiles, which is flabbergasted to think. And fast fashion is a major contributor to that. And we're all responsible and part of the fast fashion industry. And it's creating more and more cheaper clothes that don't last as long as conventional clothing. And this is where the major issue is happening, that there's more clothing ending up in landfill across the whole UK.
I mean, I guess most people, though, don't see that end of it. What they see is the bit that when they click online or they go into a high street shop, they're getting cheap clothes and they're getting that sort of designer look and they're not paying the price. We don't consider, do we, what happens later down the line, if you like?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We see this fast fashion is cheap. We go out and buy it, and we're buying it more often rather than buying something once or twice a year. We're buying it 6 or 7 or 8 times a year, and it's not lasting long. And we're not bothered about where it goes. We wear it once or twice, as you said. We discard it by any means necessary, either in the landfill bin or a recycling bin, and then we go and buy something else. And that's the major issue across the whole of the UK.
Of course, we look at this from a UK point of view, Peter, but actually globally, the same thing is happening, that the amount of input that's going into the raw materials, if you like, is increasing, but then the lifespan of the items that they're creating are decreasing. And that it comes to a point where that just isn't sustainable. And we're probably at that point now, aren't we?
Yeah, well, it's definitely not sustainable. And it also causes more issues for CO2 emissions, water pollution. Fast fashion is a major contributor to this. And as you said, it can't be sustainable. We need to do something about it now rather than waiting 5 or 10 years down the road. It needs to be changed pretty urgently.
And of course, one of the things then, and one of the outcomes from all this is that we end up, don't we, with wardrobes and drawers and cupboards full of clothes, the things we bought, for the summer holiday from 3 years ago, the things we wore once, or the thing we accepted as a gift and never really wanted to wear. We all sort of hoard these clothes away thinking, oh, a time will come where I'll wear these again. We rarely do we? So there is that thing of, because we've not invested in them, we feel like we may as well chuck them out. We don't feel like, well, I've spent money on this, so I'll make sure that I'm wearing it and I'll get my money's worth. Yeah,
well, because fashion is so cheap now, or some of it is, we are throwing away clothing more and more often, rather than, as you say, you go into the cupboard and there's loads of items in there from your summer holidays, etc. The good thing is if people are recycling that aspect and in that way, we tend to find that goes more to recycling rather than just throwing a t-shirt out that's ripped or stained. When there's a big clear out, you tend to find that will lead more to the recycling side of the textile trade, basically, rather than it being going to landfill. It's usually individual items that are causing the major issues.
And I guess if you have got these items of clothing and they are quality or they've got more life in them, we've got to look at those opportunities to reuse them, to repurpose them as well. And some high street stores, some online retailers have started to introduce things like the sustainable fashion sort of lines, if you like, or the sort of the bins within the shops as well. And that's obviously what your organization has become sort of experts in as well. What happened when you put items in one of these recycling bins? What happens to them next?
So basically, when you donate your bag of clothing into one of these clothing banks, we collect it. It goes back to one of our depots. We've got 3 in the mainland UK and 1 in Northern Ireland. And it's sorted and graded by hand. We have, in Scotland alone, we have 300 members of staff in the factory. We're sorting about 600 tonnes a week of clothing. And it's sorted and graded into over 150 different grades of material for the reuse sector. So your men's jeans, your women's blouses, men's jumpers, children's clothing, it's all graded and sorted into individual items, and it's sold on for reuse.
So when it gets sold on for use, where would that reappear? Where would those clothes reappear? Like a pair of my jeans, if you like. Who might be wearing them next?
So the biggest reuse markets in the whole of the world are East and West Africa. So countries like Kenya, Nigeria, Malawi, all your East and West African countries, respectively. That's where the biggest market. Eastern Europe's got a lot of reuse market as well, but East and West Africa is predominantly where all worldwide reused textiles end up.
And what sort of prices do they end up paying there? What's the sell-on price there?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. Our customers buy in bulk, so they'll buy containers worth of clothing and bales. Then the bales will go to, say, Kenya, and then our customer will then sell on to their customers, and ultimately it goes all the way down the chain to your single market trader, who will then sell these items individually. Regarding pricing and that, I'm not entirely sure, but it has to be sustainable for the current markets in that country at the time.
And I guess as well, because those countries that you touched on there across Africa, Eastern Europe as well, because they're buying a pre-made product, the amount of water and countless other things, insecticides and all those other things that go into making clothes, you don't need to put them in because those clothes are already made and they've got life to them.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it creates an environment for trade and for working for local communities and local members of the community for working in these market stalls. So they create an employment through reuse from material that's sprung into the country from abroad. There's no manufacturing, as you said, of textiles over there. There's a finished product, but also still creates employment opportunities.
Can I ask you then, obviously, if everyone stops donating clothes, then you don't get that business, right? But we've got to strike a balance, haven't we, between people buying the clothes that they kind of need and they want, because we all like to look and feel good, don't we? But there's got to be a sustainable chain, hasn't there? A process in place that means when we do buy, we know where it's come from, we know the environmental impact, and we can almost offset it, can't we, by thinking, well, I can donate and it will go somewhere, which means that there's not a knock-on impact down the line. We've got to get that right, haven't we? There's a stat that the fashion industry is the fourth highest polluting industry on the planet, and I think if things stay the same, it'll be something like it'll be 50% over its carbon goals by 2050. Huge numbers that we're talking about, and globally as well. So we've got to get this right, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got to get it right. And as you say, I think it's about 10% of global CO2 comes from the fashion industry, which is more than any airline running. And you can imagine how many planes are in the sky every year. We do need to do something. And these take-back schemes that your fashion industry stores are doing is a great start, because it's alerting people to, when they're buying fashion, they can actually take it back. It can be repurposed into another reuse product, or it can be recycled into another product. And I think that's where we need to focus on, in recycling and reuse, so that everybody knows where it comes from and where it goes, and how we can better sort reuse across the whole board.
Absolutely.
And extending the life of fashion, because fast fashion is called that for a reason. It's made, it's discarded quicker than probably the next shipment of clothing comes into the country. And we need to try and stop that, and make sure that there is an available market for people to buy reuse, not just abroad, but in the UK as well. And we are seeing that. Asda, for instance, have started selling second-hand clothing in some of their major stores in the UK. That's a great start. And I'd like to see that happening across all supermarkets, all fashion industries, that they have a reuse sector, maybe not just for their clothing range, but even for other clothing ranges. I think that would be a very good start anyway.
And just generationally as well, I think there was a generation, the older generation, who were sort of the make, do and mend. They had to repair things, and then we've had a generation who now have sort of grown into this sort of fast fashion world. It's interesting when you look at the research that actually the younger generation, who are maybe a little bit more environmentally conscious, are starting to be a little bit more open to the idea of things like even clothing rental rather than buying things. Do you think that's going to be part of the story here, that there's going to be a generation who kind of have to wake up to it a little bit, and actually the next generation coming through are probably going to be the innovators in this, in terms of how we find a way forward?
Yeah, I think the way that we're going, definitely the next generation is going to have the benefit, because all these processes are going to be in place. Whereas, as you say, rental of clothing, sustainable bring back schemes. this is just a start for us, but the next generation, it's probably going to be the normal for them, which ultimately will help the whole climate change anyway, and reducing the need for fast fashion.
Absolutely. People have been asked to support as well, Wear Care Share through Cash for Kids. People have been always brilliant with support for Cash for Kids. This one's a little bit different as well, because normally it's about the cash in your pocket going into a bucket. Instead, we say, have a route into the wardrobe, see what you got, put it in one of the bins, which will be provided in our communities up and down the country. And then the benefit then comes back to Cash for Kids down the line as well. So a little bit of a change in what we normally ask you for, Peter, but I guess you're keen to tell people and reassure people that if they do get involved, as you say, the clothes do go somewhere. And of course, in our case, we'll get the benefit going back to the local community through those sort of cash donations. Yeah,
definitely. We've worked with Cash for Kids for over 15 years. We've generated funds close to £2.5 million through recycling clothing alone, which roughly equates to about 6,500 tons of textiles we've collected for Cash for Kids in the past 15 years. It's phenomenal. And we want that to continue. And by putting clothing in good condition, as long as it's not wet or soiled, into these clothing banks, we can then process it, sort it for reuse or the recycling market, and Cash for Kids benefit from the revenue we give them, and that money is kept locally, which is very close to our heart, because we're a local community company. We employ local people, and we like to see the benefits that Cash for Kids do within our area.
Absolutely. More information about Wear Care Share over on the website. Peter, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.